I know it seems like the same old thing happening over and over again on this Bitcoin chart, but right now there is a lot of exciting things to talk about on the zoomed in price action of Bitcoin, especially as it relates to where we are in the cycle. What actually is making this move different? And there's a bunch of technicals that make it different, but November 5th approaching very quickly, elections. What does historical data tell us about elections? Because I think this is very important, especially as we start thinking about potential up-only mode for Bitcoin and crypto markets. Hit the subscribe, hit the like. We have a lot to discuss in this video. So let's start zoomed out and just talk about some things that are going on. I posted this video, and I want to use this for just some general like underlining context. Bitcoin in pressure cooker as crypto enters political world stage. This was May 30th, 2023. Just watch this very quick clip. I like to go back to the charts and kind of evaluate where we are in the cycles of Bitcoin. And again, here's the Bitcoin halving coming up. Here is the bear market that we just survived. And we have just elections coming up, right? And not the too distant future. So the question is, as Bitcoin gets this stage, how does it interact with this next cycle that's coming up, this Bitcoin halving, right? How does it interact with this last piece of time before the Bitcoin? So how has it interacted so far, everybody? Well, it was $27,000 when I did that video, and you can kind of actually see on this chart, I did the video back here, and we're at $67,000 right now. This is how it's interacted so far. And what's absolutely exciting for me as I track these markets and continue to track the macro is we've not even entered that parabolic bull season yet, which I still think is on its way. So if we're looking at these charts now, what does this mean? What does it mean for the short term? What does it mean for what's happening right here? It's getting very critical on the short term because we have elections November 5th. And playing into this story as well, as we were zoomed out back then, just talking about what's going to be happening. Here's something that's happening that we didn't foresee exactly. BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF became the third largest ETF in year-to-date flows, the fastest growing ETF in history. You want to compare this to gold? Look at this chart. Bitcoin ETF inflows hit 20 billion, outpacing gold 10x. Look at year one of gold in black. Gold ETF. And gold ETF grew. You can see it year two, black, gold ETF. Year three, year four, it grew. Look at year one in gold inflows. While this is happening now as well, Bitcoin exchange inflows drop 95%. So we have this incredible confluence of data, not just on the charts from a cycle perspective, and the charts is something we've been tracking, but just what is happening on chain. What is happening with inflows from institutional interests in this year one of Bitcoin ETF? And what's going on with elections? This is kind of what I want to talk about as we're at this critical breakout of this over half a year consolidation. Right now we're dipping. It could look like a concern to some, but again, zoom out on the charts. Dips happen all over the place. So let's start talking about this. Let's start talking about November 5th, 2024, because when we start looking at previous cycles, especially at this moment of the cycle, and what I'm talking about is here's the Bitcoin halving. So post Bitcoin halving, right around this marker, which is like historically altcoin season, let's start looking at this. I brought up this daily chart, and I'm going to zoom out in the daily, and I'm going to do something. I'm just going to look at previous cycles, and it's going to just take a little scrolling. But here is November 5th, 2020, and you can see what happened then, what happened next, up only. The other thing last cycle I want to point out is this trend line was broken right around that moment, and that plays a lot into, I think, the structure that we're getting on Bitcoin right now. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. But this is last cycle. Look at that purple line. We're very close to that purple line this cycle. Here's post-Bitcoin halving. There's election, and this kicked off up-only mode for Bitcoin. Let's go back to the previous cycle and zoom out. What happened? Now let's zoom back in, November 5th. Not as just crazy of a trend line break or anything, any structure breakout, but what happened here? November 5th, 2016, sorry. Up only. Let's go back even to the previous cycle, all the way back here, 2012. What happened after November 5th, 2012? Up only, post Bitcoin halving. So here we are. We have this very similar you know, harmony from a charting perspective. We talk about it all the time. There are so many indicators that come into play at this moment of time of the cycles. But here we are, and we even have just election data playing into the cycles. And I think it's very important as we start really evaluating even the short term. And let's do that. Let's do some short-term analysis on Bitcoin price action right now. So the one thing I really thought was interesting with last cycle is if you look at November 5th, 2020, we got this breakout of this key trend line on Bitcoin. And this kicked off that up-only mode. If we go look at the charts right now, I think this plays into our analysis, which is to say we're getting this breakout of this trend line this cycle. I know it's not November 5th. November 5th is right here. But how does this actually interact with this November 5th moment, right? Right now, we got the breakout to the upside. Are we getting, is this it, right? Are we going to get the immediate short-term support at the upper trend line? I would like to see that. But again, I think I discussed in yesterday's video, there's not been much separation from this upper trend line. Normally in throwbacks, I like to see more separation before an actual throwback to the trend line. So if Bitcoin starts falling below this trend line again, it's kind of just, for me, yes, we broke the trend line, but for me, it's almost just like lower high resistance once again. But if that's the case, here we have November 5th approaching quick. Is that when we're going to see the breakout of Bitcoin out of this massive over half a year pattern? And if that were to be the case, what does support look like if we're gonna consolidate? Well, it could just trickle along the upper trend line. But as mentioned in yesterday's video, let's just continue watching support, right? We have a 20-day support just above 64,000. We have the 200-day support just above 63,000. And we have the 50-day support right around 62. So 62 to 64,000 is the moving average support area that I would be watching. And we can even take a Fibonacci as we're looking at this, because obviously we have this lower trend line touch, then we have this swing, this higher low. But from that higher low right there to the current swing high, look at this area, this higher low Fibonacci. It's almost very confluent with the moving average support. So the upper end of the Fibonacci around 63,000 and 61,000 is the lower end. So if we integrate into the support area, the Fibonacci with those moving averages, it's $61,000 to $64,000 is what I'd be watching for to see if there's support for Bitcoin, if we're going to throw back, right? And this could be the move that's happening right now. So from swing high to maybe 61, that's 11% dip. What if Bitcoin holds support all in that area? And going into election, we start getting that breakout that we've seen in historical data on this chart. That's speculative, I realize that. But how can we not take multi-year consistency of election data and just at least speculate here, especially as we are entering this critical area? And here's what makes it so different right now. This move even right now happening, this breakout of the trend line. Go to a weekly chart. It's Bitcoin momentum. Look at this momentum oscillator on Bitcoin on the weekly. That's a MACD crossing above the signal line. We just started turning green on the histogram. We have a momentum shift happening on these Bitcoin charts, and the MACD is looking very nice, a very nice illustration of the momentum shift that could really be happening on the macro. And this is after, once again, over half a year of consolidation. So, and the other thing is, if you look at this zoomed out weekly chart, I kind of circled this moment because this moment for us this cycle is kind of like this moment last cycle. And again, there's the elections sprinkled in there. And what happened? That kicked off Bitcoin up-only mode. So we know what support is, even on the short term. Let's see how today kind of plays out, right? Maybe Bitcoin sees support at this upper trend line. If we really want to evaluate really short-term support, it's really exactly where Bitcoin is right now. We're looking at like $67,000. I don't know if it's going to hold support again. We haven't had that separation to the upside. And so it would not surprise me if Bitcoin just kind of keeps trickling down or sideways into these moving averages. So that's really what I'm watching on Bitcoin right now. I wanted to kind of keep this straight and to the point. You see how all of these things are coming together. And more importantly, as we track these cycles, you see how it's all a macro story that's playing out. I know we zoom in a lot and we cover these shorter term price moves, But that gets volatile and it becomes very emotional. And so zooming out, in my view, is the way to play this game, this crypto game. So these are my thoughts today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe. Your support, it means a ton to me as we kind of continue tracking all of this data. And also, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. I really appreciate it. I will see you all in the next video. Have an awesome day, start to your week, and God bless.